Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. to provide landowners valuable information that you need regarding the natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. This is the show for you, the landowner. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus is on landowner representation. In other words, not gas companies, not pipeline companies. Don't consult with them. Don't work with them. Work on behalf of my clients, the landowners, in many different aspects, including, of course, gas lease negotiations, pipeline, water line agreements, royalty and royalty deduction issues, meter sites, well sites, doing a lot of more well site work, surface use agreements, estate planning. I've been talking about that more and more because I've been doing more and more estate planning work with clients, people who were clients who are now transitioning and starting to get royalties, as well as new landowners, people who listen to the show who say, hey, I think it's time that I start getting these affairs in order. God forbid if something were ever to happen, but we want to make sure that you have a plan in place that's going to meet your specific needs for you and your family. Not just some cookie cutter plan, but something that's going to work for you, your goals, your life situation, your family situation. Also, want to remind everybody, got to check out the websites, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. I know you probably get tired of hearing it, but really need to check out the sites. I just put up a new blog this past week on lease extensions, having a lot of clients over the past few years, but individuals who are approached by gas companies for an extension of an existing oil and gas lease. In other words, you have a lease now, it's going to expire. Sometimes it's going to maybe be in a few months. Sometimes it's going to be in a year or maybe even a couple years. And a gas company approaches you and says, hey, we would like to extend your existing oil and gas lease. And because of this price of gas being so low, we're starting to see this maybe a little more than what we would otherwise. In other words, gas companies are not being as active in the drilling operations. So they say, hey, we'd like to essentially buy a little more time here to allow us to extend your lease, to allow us some more time before we have to conduct any drilling operations or what are defined as operations under the term of your oil and gas lease. So that's really important. Some people think, oh, wow, this is my great opportunity. I'm just going to say no. I signed for not as much money as maybe I could have if I would have waited. So this is my opportunity. You need to be careful because in many cases, it's not going to work out that way. Some cases it can, but many cases it will not. So what we want to do, it's a repeated theme that you'll see or hear me talk about all the time. You'll see on the websites. This advice and these discussions aren't for any specific individual, but are designed to clue you in, direct you, focus you on some things that you need to be thinking about, things that you need to be looking at. So when these issues come up, you need to understand that you need to get facts, get information, become educated, get some assistance for your particular situation. I can't say that enough. For your specific situation. You can't simply listen to your neighbor or the guy at the gas station or at church. You need to get your information and get your advice for your situation, and not from the landman who's trying to get you to sign or execute or agree to something because he's working for the company, he or she, and not you. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every week on these stations. And also, you can always contact me directly. Last week, and I got a little fired up, and I tend to do that here and there. But last week, I was more commercial than what I typically am, saying like, hey, if you have a pipeline right-of-way agreement, you should definitely give me a call, because I'm seeing more and more people, as we have seen for a while, but it's continuing, that I think people are being taken advantage of, that landowners are being taken advantage of. They're not getting the information they need. The company employees are not giving them all the information. They're selectively giving them information, but not giving them the information that you need from the landowner side. And it's continuing to occur all the time. I'm going to talk today. I'm going to talk as we go on here about some about option agreements. I'm going to talk. I've talked a lot. I'm going to do it a little bit different perspective, and you need to pay attention. You need to check this out. You need to stay tuned here, because this is, even if you don't have an option agreement, this is also going to be kind of an indication. As I often say, I try to pick subjects that aren't so narrowly tailored to only a few individuals, but can have a broad informational benefit to everybody who's out there listening, or the majority of people. So even though you may not have an option agreement presented, and maybe you never have an option agreement presented, well, this is still going to give you some insight as to how the companies will operate. So no matter what type of agreement you get or you're presented with, you'll at least have some idea of, okay, how do these companies operate? And the first thing that you need to do is always, in my opinion, take a step back, get some information and say, okay, do I need to do this? Do I want to do this? What are my options? What can I do here? So I'm going to talk about option agreements today, but we got some other things here I want to cover first. One of the things that I've seen, I touched on gas prices here a little earlier. So what we hear, and if you're out there and you're a landowner and you've received any type of agreement or offer recently, you're going to hear, well, the price of gas. Well, the price of gas. Because the price of gas is so low, we can't pay you as much money. We can't give you as good of agreement. You're going to hear that, and if you're out there and you have an offer, almost guaranteed you've heard that, whether it be a lease, a pipeline, a surface agreement, almost every type of an agreement, the company's going to stress that. The landman's going to stress that, and of course they are, because that is always what I say, self-serving to the company. Interestingly, when gas prices were at $6, $7, $8 per 1,000 cubic feet, we didn't hear the company say, hey, well, price of gas is pretty high, so we're going to give you more money for this. No, this is an opportunity for the company to point to the price of gas to justify giving you, in many cases, again, you got to look at your individual circumstance, your individual agreement, but you got to be careful that the company isn't just using this price of gas idea and argument to you to justify or to convince you to enter into an inferior agreement. You have to be careful of that. Now look, there's a price of gas situation out there, and we need to address that, and we need to see what type of impact it's going to have on your particular case. In some cases, it will have an impact, and it makes sense that it has an impact, but in the majority of cases, it's just simply not true. And in fact, within this past month, I had a client with a gas lease who signed a gas lease for, this is the honest to God truth, signed a gas lease for, I think, as high a per acre price. I can't think of one. A client in the past who signed a gas lease for a higher per acre bonus price than I have the client who right now we're in the process of finishing up this lease. So this company is paying this person a very substantial per acre price and a very substantial price overall in this current gas market. So this is just an example of this company isn't saying, well, the price of gas is so low, obviously these prices aren't going to stay this way forever. You have companies only drilling, say, one well on well sites that they may be planning to drill 10 wells. They have the ability to control their output and production. So there are many, many factors to consider here. This is not just a simple issue, but it's something that we need to look at and just remember, well, of course, I always say it's like, they have this bucket of ammunition, that they come to the landowner with, and they start reaching in there and they start pulling things out. Okay, well, if we get a pipeline for example, then you're going to get royalties. So we pull that out of the bucket and we throw that argument at them. Hey, you got to sign this so we can get your royalties. Well, the landowner maybe already is getting royalties. So we say, what else do we have in our little bucket here? We look in and we say, oh, well, hey, your neighbors. We want to make sure your neighbors are getting royalties. Well, that's not going to convince me either in this case. And so they just keep digging in and digging in. Now, something to pay attention to. And this is something where I think that I can say this. Well, I know I can say it, but something that seems to me to be something we should be looking at from the landowner side. Yes, the price of gas is down. Yes, undoubtedly, inarguably, it is having a negative effect, and production is slowed, and it's having a negative consequence on the industry. Now, we have to understand that what that means to the landowner side. However, think about this. As the company's profit margins are being squeezed, as there is more pressure and less development, I have started to see, in my opinion, what I think is the company landmen or representatives kind of maybe pushing the envelope a little more than what they have. Now, I'm not saying committing any criminal acts by any means, not remotely close. But, when I start saying about this bucket of tools that you can try to use to convince the landowner to do something, well, as you have more pressure on you, and think about these landmen, as they have more pressure to get signatures and to get things done, well, maybe they're going to be a little more aggressive in these discussions. Maybe they're going to say some things that they may not have otherwise said, months ago or a year ago. And think about this. One of the things that we've seen, and we've seen this recently, and we've seen this trend where companies would have a lot of landmen working for them in a given area. Now, and it's happened for a while, but it's starting to even ratchet up more, as this production slows, as leases are signed, as pipeline agreements are signed, landmen aren't as needed as they were before. So if you needed 50 landmen for a company in an area, well, now things have slowed, and especially given this price of gas, things have slowed even more. So they start to hold the property by the leases. They don't need to be as aggressive in obtaining all of these right-of-way agreements or all of these leases at the same time. So, and also they can't, they want to cut budget and not continue to pay these people, as many people. So what do? They're going to have to lay people off, and we're seeing that. We've seen it for a while, and we're seeing it more and more. Well, if you're a company landman, and say you're one of 50 guys and girls, you're one of 50, well, you have a suspicion, and you see in your industry, maybe you've seen already that there used to be 60 and now there's 50 of you. Well, now there's going to be another layoff. Well, what do you think? Who is the company going to lay off? Well, and this is speculation, so let's put that out there. But who are they going to lay off? Well, maybe they're going to look at seniority, and maybe that's going to be the only factor. However, maybe they're going to look at production. They're going to look at which one of these 50 landmen, or what group, or how many. Let's start rating them as to who is getting the best results. Which people, which landmen. Look here, I got 50 landmen, and I see that I have 10 guys or girls that are getting a lot of signatures. I have some others that aren't getting that many signatures, and then I have this other group that's kind of in the average here. So I'm going to lay half of these people off. Well, which ones am I going to lay off? Well, if I'm not going by seniority, I'm going to go by results. So if I have some landmen who are doing double the signatures of other people for, say, pipeline right-of-way agreements or leases or anything else, well, I'm going to be more inclined to keep them. If I have other people who aren't getting signatures, I'm going to probably be less inclined to keep them. So when I'm looking here and I say, well, who's really performing? Who's getting me signatures? Who's getting landowners to sign? Well, those are the people that I'm going to keep, and the ones who aren't producing are going to be the first ones that I let go. That would be my thought as how a company would operate, and if I'm a landman, that's what I'm going to be thinking too. Hey, I'm up against it. I'm going to talk more about this right after this break. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. Again, I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. And also, you can check out, you miss any of today's show, you miss any of the prior shows. I have been doing the show now since August of 2010. Been doing All Things Marcellus weekly show since August of 2010. So you can go check out on the website at pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. We've renovated, completely redid the pagasleaseattorney.com website, bunch of radio shows up there. We don't have them all up yet. It's a job to get them all up going back to August of 2010, but we're working on that. I'm also continuing to work on the pipeline site. Did a new blog this week on the gas site regarding lease extensions. Make sure you check out the blog section, trying to make sure that I get up a new blog every couple weeks. If not, sometime sooner, sometimes maybe a little longer. Okay, I'm going to get back here. Now, I want to reset a little bit and say, look, this is just a theory that I have, and if you knew me, I have theories quite often, but this is one of the theories I have. And what I see is I start to see landowners maybe being pressured a little more intensely to enter into agreements. I see a lot more almost like relentless phone calls, contact, people showing up at the door unannounced. And, we've seen that before, and we saw it when there was a lot of competition for leases, especially, 2008, 2009, 2010. Every time a landowner would turn around, there'd be another knock at the door. But that was really because of the competition to secure the leases, and there were a lot of different companies fighting it out. So you had a lot of different landmen in the area fighting it out, seeking to get these leases. Well, now, my theory is, again, this is my theory, I'm starting to see where landowners are getting a lot of contact. For example, often it's pipeline right-of-way agreements, where the company landmen calling them all the time, stopping by the house, really kind of making the landowner or landowner's report feeling pressured, sometimes even to the point where they feel harassed. And I'm not saying that that's, this is a practice, but certainly we're starting to see where there's more contact, and sometimes, again, it can be relentless. And my theory to account for part of this, now, obviously they want to get these things signed. They'll say, hey, we want to get gas to market. That's why we're doing this. This is all about you. It's all about you. Interesting. It's all about you, landowner. We're here to help you. But what we see is, with the price of gas, we're seeing a slowdown in development. If the price of gas was much higher, the companies would be drilling much more aggressively to produce more gas, to sell gas at a higher price to make more profit. Well, because the price of gas is low, very low, what we're seeing is a lot of companies are drilling a hole or well in the unit. And sometimes this is a general thing. So sometimes we'll see multiple wells, but typically we'll see a well drilled in the unit, and then the company will pick up and move on. Even though they may plan to drill 6 wells, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever that number is, they're only drilling one and moving on. In most cases, by drilling that single well in this unit, and let's say it's a 1,000-acre unit, by drilling one well in this unit, most cases you hold all of that property, meaning that you're not obligated to continue to drill. Those leases that are in that unit, the properties that are leased that are contained in that production unit, well, they're now what we call held under the terms of your lease. Meaning you're not going to get a new lease, your lease isn't going to expire, and the company has met the terms of the lease. So they'll drill one well, pick up, move on, and they'll keep making sure that they've drilled one well at least into all of these units in order to do what I just said, to hold these properties, not have to worry about the wells, the leases expiring, so now they've held these properties. So, makes sense. We've drilled one, price of gas goes up, you'll start seeing companies come in and drilling more wells, but for now, company says, we purchased these leases, we paid this bonus money, we want to make sure that we hold these leases so it doesn't expire, but we don't need to drill aggressively at this time because the price of gas is very low. So that's what we're seeing. That's what's occurring out there. We can't control that. That's the market that we're in right now. Well, at the same time then, we have these companies that are still acquiring pipelines, and they're out there. They have their landmen looking out there and they're seeking to obtain pipeline right-of-way agreements. But because of what's going on, they're not aggressively. Pipeline projects that were scheduled in a year or two are getting pushed back. Wells, I have clients where well pads were planned for this year. Now they're moved back to 2017. Things are being pushed back and pushed back. Well, as a result of this slowdown in the industry, well, companies do not need as many landmen. They don't need as many people out there seeking to acquire leases. They don't need as many people out there seeking to acquire pipeline right-of-way agreements. So, as a landman, if you're employed in northeastern, anywhere in Pennsylvania, but if you're employed, we'll say in Pennsylvania, well, you know there's been a pullback, and you've seen your coworkers and friends being laid off, and that there's not as many people needed in these positions as there used to be. So what do you have? You start getting some more pressure on these individuals that if they're given an assignment or they're told to get out there, hey, we need you to acquire these right-of-ways, well, I think it's a human nature. I mean, I think this is a tendency. This is my theory, but I think it's human nature where, hey, I want to have my job. I want to preserve my job, and I'm seeing these people being laid off. So what do I want to do? Well, I want to make sure that I produce and be the best employee as possible and get results. So if there's another round of layoffs, I'm not going to be a part of that round. Or maybe what happens is they say, we're going to move these guys from a certain area. Things have really slowed down here in whatever, Tioga, Lycoming, whatever county, Susquehanna, Bradford. So we're going to be moving people out. And we have a new project starting up in Louisiana. And so what are we going to do? We're going to move guys, but we had 50 guys working up here. We only need 20 down in Louisiana. So 30 people are going to be laid off. Well, you're sitting there and you're saying, well, geez, I want to keep employed. It's a good job. You know, hey, who doesn't want to stay employed? So what do I need to do? I need to produce. So now I kind of have some more pressure on me to keep producing. So when I go out to that landowner and I knock on the door, I'm under some more stress to get signatures on what I used to be under. When the gas prices were high and the company was hiring, well, it's a little different now. So I'm under more pressure. What do? Maybe I, present a stronger case for the landowner to sign this particular agreement, where maybe before I wouldn't have used the exact same techniques, persuasion tactics, supplying of information, but now maybe I'm going to be a little more aggressive in order to really try to encourage this individual to sign. Once again, this is a theory of mine, but it's something that it seems to me that I'm tending to see where if a landman is under pressure, he's going to or she's going to move that pressure. They're going to transfer that pressure, if you will, to the landowner, saying, hey, we want you to sign this. So as a landowner, you need to be kind of aware of these things and understand that, hey, as always, knowing that the landman works for the company, not for you, but also knowing that, hey, this may be a situation where I really want to go get somebody to explain to me what's going on from my perspective, because I don't know that I trust this information that I receive, because this individual is working for the company and they may be under quite a bit of stress to try to get somebody to sign or get me to sign because of what the current market is. So again, I stress this is a theory of mine, but I think it's something that people need to be aware of. And also that, or at least be aware of my theory, I guess, but I say these things, and sometimes I talk about things being self-serving to the company. I always pride myself of being what I think to be aware of what I'm saying, and what the secondary meaning is as we go out. So when I say, hey, you need to understand the situation, you need to talk to somebody. Well, isn't that self-serving for me? You need to talk to somebody. Hey, call me. Isn't that self-serving to me that I'm saying these things and then I'm saying you need to get somebody, here I am? Well, a few things there. One, yes, that's part of what's going on here, but I always say, and I mean this, whether you contact me or somebody else, and I say this often and I mean it every time I say it, whether you contact me or contact someone else, you owe it to yourself to get good information from your perspective. Understanding that the landman works for the company and he or she is not out there to get you the best possible deal for you. They're there to get your signature for the company. So, yes, am I saying you should get your assistance? Absolutely. Am I a lawyer who assists people? Absolutely. It is what I do. But whether you call me or call someone else if you want to. Call me if you want to. But please get this information and assistance. Understand your rights. Understand what's going on. Understand whether you can say no. Understand if you can get a better agreement. Because we have all of these examples out there. And I could tell war story after war story after war story where landowners almost every single day are signing bad agreements because they're not informed. And speaking with somebody who could inform them, whether it's me or somebody else, they would protect themselves and guarantee that they get the best possible agreement, or simply say no thank you and move on. You should not be intimidated. You should not be harassed. You should not feel uncomfortable. You should understand what's going on, understand your rights, understand whether you need to agree to something, whether you don't need to agree to something, and look at it from your side and get assistance from your side, not the company side. So yes, it's self-serving. Yes, it's what I do. But if it's not me, make it someone else. Do not just simply take the company's word and start signing agreements. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You are listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And just want to remind everybody, if you miss any of today's show, you want to go back and listen to other shows. I've been doing the radio show since August of 2010. August of 2010. So you can go back, go check out PA Gas Lease, attorney.com, check out pipelineattorney.com. Very proud of the information. It's available up there. Visit the site, check it out, whether you're looking for representation or not. Good information, things to make you think. We have sections on the website that cover the vast majority of agreements that companies present, to just give you some background and some information. And hey, yeah, look, call me. I'd love to help you. However, whether it's me or somebody else, get assistance from your side. Get assistance with somebody who has the experience necessary to assist you. No offense to divorce lawyers, but don't have your divorce lawyer negotiate or review your contract unless they know what they're doing with this contract. That's more true than ever, because you have to understand how these markets change and the evolution of this process. And if you're not living it every day, it's going to be tough. There's other people out there that do what I do. Whether it's me or somebody else, please make sure you're getting assistance. Protect yourself. Get the best agreement, and don't make mistakes that you're going to regret maybe soon, or maybe decades, or some point down the line. Please make sure you're getting that information to protect yourself, your property, and your family. Okay, I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. Up against this other break, I'm going to talk about, like I said, I want to talk about a survey permission form here, and I should be able to get to options. I'll be right back after this break, and I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 on these stations. Stay tuned. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. Reminder, you can contact me anytime, 570-307-0702. That's 570-307-0702. Check out PAGasLeaseAttorney.com. Check out PipelineAttorney.com. Not going to get into these FERC lines, which are these interstate lines, but doing a lot more work with that and getting, representing more and more clients with these lines as well. And they're different. It's a different game. And we need to understand the rules. We need to understand what our options are, and we need to take advantage the best we can of the circumstance. I've done some other shows on this. I'll be doing more in the future, but you need to get information on this because these are tricky. They're not like other agreements. We've got to understand what we're presented with, and we've got to make the best of every situation for you, the landowner. Those lines, at the end of the day, there's a good chance you're not going to be happy, but you're going to make the best of that situation that you're presented with. And that's what we want to make sure that you're always doing, making the best of your specific situation. Okay, I want to talk about a survey permission form. And this is some general information, not meant for anyone specifically. But here's, I think this is interesting. I think a lot of people can get some value from this. Sometimes what happens is a pipeline company typically comes to your door and they say, hey, we'd like to get survey permission. We're thinking about using your property for a potential pipeline right of way, and we'd like to get survey permission. And they may present you with the form, and typically they do. Now, couple things. First and foremost, I am going to talk about a gathering line for well sites, meaning that this survey permission is presented to you or requested by a company who is going to install pipelines. They're going to gather gas from local or regional wells that ultimately this company is not going to ever have the power of condemnation or eminent domain. There are other cases on these, what I touched on before, these FERC lines, FERC, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Those lines, the company at the end of this process is almost definitely going to have condemnation power and the power of eminent domain. But again, we don't just throw in the towel and start signing things. We make the best of that situation. So I'm not talking about that situation, the FERC line. I'm going to talk here about survey permission for pipelines that are being presented to you by a company for a pipeline that's not going to be part of a FERC application for an interstate pipeline. And that's the vast majority of these lines. So we get a lot of calls, and one of my standard rule and recommendations to all my clients is, and all my past clients, and in fact to listeners is, hey, look, if you're being asked to sign an agreement, give me a call and we'll decide, or we'll talk about, and we'll do intake here at the office and say, hey, is this something that you may want to have some assistance for? Is it something you may need assistance with? We're not here to generate work that is not necessary. I'm not here to send people legal bills for something they don't need to be done. But we want to make sure that landowners aren't in a situation where they think, oh boy, I don't want to get a legal bill. I don't know if I need help, so I'm just going to go ahead and sign this here. Listen, don't do that. Do not do that. We want to make sure that if you're going to sign something, that you understand, hey, should I have got some assistance with this? If you don't want to have any assistance, that's fine, but at least understand what's being presented to you. So all of my clients, I think probably close to about 100%, we have this retention, which is extremely high, and if you have any type of document ever presented to you, clients call, they'll send me an email, say, hey, Doug, got this document, is this okay to sign? Sometimes they say, hey, look, not a big deal, here's what it's about. If you're comfortable with this, go ahead and do it. You don't need me for this. Or, whoa, wait a minute. Let's talk about this, because this is more serious maybe than how it's been presented to you. So often, and this is kind of my little public service thing here, but again, this isn't legal advice for any specific individual whatsoever, but it's a general information here, which is valuable, I hope. So company says, hey, we want to do a survey across your property for a pipeline. So they hand you a survey permission form or some type of document that they ask you to sign. So I have here one in front of me. And so this one says the grantor, being the landowner, grants permission to the pipeline company, its successors, assigns, affiliates, agents, employees, contractors to enter upon my land for the purpose of performing surveys that include, but are not limited to, the characterization of the land as to property ownership, topographic features, cultural resources, wetland delineation, and archaeology. So, let me say this from a practical standpoint. Usually this means getting out there. They'll have some guys out there surveying the property. Typically it's not going to involve motorized vehicles, but that's something you may want to clarify. But I say this to people often where, well, should we do this? What should we do? Well, one thing I can say, people will call and complain about certain activities that a company may have done on the property. Generally speaking, surveys, when companies go out there and they conduct these surveys, I get very, very few calls. And it's hard to really even think of any where landowners call and say, geez, these guys came out there, they did this survey, they whatever it was, they left trash, they really screwed up my property. I don't get those calls. I'm not saying it doesn't occur. I'm not saying, hey, maybe it will occur. But generally speaking, in representing hundreds upon hundreds of people and getting calls from people I don't even represent to maybe complain about certain company activities, this is just not something that I get calls about. And if I do, they are extremely rare. So you're talking about people coming out into the property. So far, okay. Then it goes on and says that the pipeline company, its agents and assigns, agree to conduct themselves in a workmanlike manner and agree to pay for any and all damages to the property, crops, and fences that are caused by said activity. Again, I don't even know, I can't think of any cases where I've had any clients or landowners call me and say, hey, these survey guys really screwed up my property. Or, they screwed up my fence, they didn't fix anything, they messed up my crops, I have a problem now with my crops. It's not something I have complaints about. So far, hey, look, I'm pretty comfortable, haven't had any complaints about this yet. It goes on, it says, the pipeline company does hereby agree to indemnify, very important, no matter what's going on in your property, you want to make sure you're getting indemnification to protect you from any type of liability. So, the pipeline company does hereby agree to indemnify and hold grantor, who is the landowner, harmless from any and all losses, damages, claims, demands, and suits, including reasonable cost and expenses incidental thereto, including court cost and attorney fees, that grantor or landowner may suffer, to incur, or to which it may be liable, to property or injuries to or death of any person resulting from the pipeline company's surveying activities on the property, unless the loss, damage, injury, or death results from the negligent or intentional acts or omissions of grantor or grantor's agents, employees, contractors, representatives, or invitees. Okay, now I want to really stress again here too. I'm not giving this the stamp of approval and saying, hey, this is great, no worries, you're all covered, but it's pretty good. This would have to be a unique individual conversation. Again, I haven't seen any problems with this yet, but you do have indemnification language, so it could in some ways be a little bit tighter, and that's something that I would address with the client only about your negligence. You could limit that a little more to further protect yourselves, but once you're informed, you as a landowner may say, hey, you know what, that's good with me, I'm okay with that, I'm comfortable with that, and that's all part of it. You need to understand what you have, what you don't have, and make your individual decision of what you're comfortable with. Sometimes landowners are more comfortable with something than what I would be, and we discussed that. Sometimes landowners are not comfortable with something or language that I actually would be comfortable with. But that's the landowner. Remember, the client, the attorney works for the client. The client ultimately would make decisions. The attorney will recommend or suggest or have discussions, but ultimately, that client is the one who's making the decision, and your job is to inform them, to make recommendations, to guide them. I often say, look, we can't make something perfect in most cases, but we do the best we can, and we want to make sure the best we can that we're eliminating surprises. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations, and we want to go on. So I'm talking about a survey permission. So the landowner's approached, asked to sign this survey permission form. Now, that's the end of the body of this form. Now, a couple things. Again, general advice, something to consider. Well, one thing is, this form doesn't kind of have a starting date or an end date. So maybe if you're concerned, you may want to say, hey, I'll grant this permission, but I only want to grant it for 3 months. Maybe you're agreeable to have it for 6 months, maybe a year. Oftentimes you can write these in. Sometimes there's a place for notes and comments, but that's something maybe you want to look at. Another thing is, do you want to be notified? So many of my clients don't like the idea of all of a sudden there's some guys showing up on their property that they weren't aware of and uninformed, and they don't want trespassers, out on the property. And they want to know, well, if this person is on the property or this group of people are on the property, are they on the property under authority of this agreement, or are they trespassers? So certainly, if I'm a landowner and there's going to be surveys being conducted on my property, I'm going to want to know when that is. I'm going to want to be notified. So that's something to discuss. Hey, I'd like to be notified. When's this going to occur? Can we limit the time frame of when this is going to occur? And then there's some other considerations that you may have uniquely as an individual. You may want to do some things with the indemnification language, but this isn't like some work-intensive project here. It's a request for survey permission, little wee bit of effort that the landowner may undertake. In some cases, just as an example, not specific advice, my landowner client would send me this and I'd say, hey, look, here's a couple little things you may want to think about. You may want to change. I don't know that you need me to really become too involved, but here's some things. And some landowners may say, well, hey, you know what? Can you help me with this? Others may say, hey, great, Doug, thanks a lot. We'll go ahead and we'll do this. But even more important, so that's the document. Now, that's just one example, and there's others out there. But I would like to see people limit the time frame. We'd like you to be noticed. We want to make sure that you have the proper indemnification, that you're not opening yourself up. Somebody gets hurt. Maybe there's, what happens? Maybe there's a hole or something, a condition on your property that maybe you're aware of and maybe you're not aware of. But here's this whole, in the law, you got to be careful because sometimes there might be a condition on your property, a dangerous condition that maybe you're not aware of, but maybe you should be, that it was something that you should have known about and you should have told these people who were going to go on the property when you knew they were going to come on the property about this dangerous condition. So we want to you just want to be careful. Usually, in almost all cases, it's not an issue, but you want to just be aware of this. So again, not specific legal advice, but just some things to be thinking about in this process. So, I'm talking about this document. Well, what if your landowner says, hey, I don't want a pipeline on my property? I don't want to agree to that. Well, you know what? I'll talk about that right after this break. We'll talk about, do you want to agree to this? Why would you want to agree with this? If you don't want to, what type of ramification can you have? We'll get in all those points when I get right back after this break you're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, here every Sunday from 8 to 9, and back right after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, attorney Doug Clark. Again, I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 on these stations. Check out pagasleaseattorney.com, pagasleaseattorney.com. We have prior shows archived up there, as well as pipelineattorney.com. We've revamped pagasleaseattorney.com, and I am working on pipelineattorney.com, just trying to squeeze it in with everything else and the clients and all the current activity. Also, reminder, again, I've said, and kind of going to keep plugging this more, that I'm doing more and more estate planning work on behalf of prior clients, as well as other landowners as they're transitioning into the royalty phase. But it's never too early. One of the repetitive themes that you'll hear me talk about all the time is we want to make sure that we're proactive. We want to be ahead of your situation, not catching up to it. So don't be afraid to acquire information, and then however you want to use it, that's up to you. But information is always good to have. Another thing, I'm becoming more active on Twitter. You can follow me at Douglas Clark, at Doug Clark Law. That's Douglas Clark, at Doug Clark Law. Check us out there as well. Okay, coming back here to the survey permission. So I was talking about this quickly resetting. Company comes out to you as the landowner and says, hey, we'd like you to give us permission to survey the property because we may want to put a pipeline right-of-way agreement, a pipeline right-of-way easement on your property. So what do? Number one, the first thing we always want to know is this for an interstate gas pipeline where there's going to be the potential of eminent domain and condemnation? Establish that early on. Remember, though, That's unlikely, but we're seeing more of those. Those are by far the minority, but we want to establish that. Ask that question directly. Never be afraid to ask these guys questions. Ask them directly. There's no reason, this doesn't have to be this game. Ask them a question. Not hide the truth, hide the ball. Hey, is this for a gathering line for wells that are in our region, or is this an interstate pipeline that's going to go from state to state, or from West Virginia across Pennsylvania up through Massachusetts? So find that out, because my approach is a little different on those things. And either way, you can always contact us, but we want to make sure that we understand that, because you may want to take a different approach. Now, I talked before some other things. Before I forget, I want to say too, we talked about some other things that maybe you want to add. Hey, call me. We want to have some notice before you come on the property. We want to limit this time frame, because if you recall, when I read this, the document, it says you give permission to us, to me, this pipeline company, but also their successors, their assigns, their affiliates, so they could assign these rights. People forget about this. You can give a company a right to do something, and then they can assign it or transfer it to another company. So you may think that the company that you're talking to now is the only company that could ever come on your property. Well, they could assign these rights to a whole other company. And if you don't have a limitation on time frame, when does this thing end? So we want to end this agreement. We want to have a termination date. Hey, you can do this, but no more than within the next 3 months. Maybe you want to be a little broad. Maybe you want to say 6 months. Maybe you want to narrow it and say 1 month. But I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see that the landowner receive notification, because not only do we want to know when this company comes on the property, but we also want to know that when we see somebody out there on the property, that they're not trespassers. That they're not, that you may think, oh, hey, it's this company I must have signed the agreement with, or must be the people I signed this agreement with. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's somebody else. So most people want to know who's on the property. So I would ask that I be notified. Another thing you want to look at is, are they going to use motorized vehicles? And by that I mean, pickup trucks, or are they going to use ATVs or similar vehicles? You're going to want to know that, because one of the things that maybe they do create ruts or create a condition. So normally you can say, yeah, okay, I'll let you on the property, but I don't want any motorized vehicles, no ATVs. Give me a call when you're going to come on, and I don't want you to have this permission more than 3 months. So you want to document that, and you need to do it the right way, and it's not hard. But I would look to put those type of limitations in these agreements. Again, this isn't specific advice for any individual, but just some things that you need to be thinking about. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And reminder, you can always contact me, 570-307-0702. That's 570-307-0702. Now, let's go to the agreement in kind of a broader sense. You may say, well, geez, I don't want a pipeline, so why would I sign this? I have no desire to have a pipeline right-of-way easement on my property. Why would I sign this? Now, let me just tell you this. It may sound strange, because I do a lot of pipeline right-of-way agreement negotiations, do agreements on behalf of clients all the time. You hear me say, I think I'm at about 50 companies that have negotiated and worked on agreements with on behalf of client landowners in Pennsylvania. That's a lot. There's a lot of pipeline right-of-way work out there, and I've done a lot, and I continue to do pipeline work almost every working day. Now, I have clients who say, I don't want a pipeline right-of-way agreement, or I don't want a pipeline easement on my property. And I say, hey, okay, if you have the right to say no, just say no, and it's over. You don't need me. We don't need to do anything further. We want to make sure that we establish what your rights are, and that's okay. I'm here to help you to understand what your rights are, and that should be the same thing with any attorney. And then, if you want to proceed, how do we handle this? So, you're sitting there and you say, you know what? under no conditions in the world would I ever want a pipeline right-of-way agreement on, or I keep saying that, I'm sorry, pipeline right-of-way easement on my property. So what do? You say, company, thank you, but no thank you. I am not interested in any pipeline right-of-way easement on my property, so I'm not going to sign this form. Respectfully, hey, no hard feelings, guys, just don't want to sign this form. Now, typically, you're going to find that they're going to go ahead and go away. Now, couple things, and this gets a little more complicated, and I don't want to go too far down this path, but sometimes the company would have the right under the terms of your oil and gas lease to conduct these type of surveys. But if you don't want a pipeline right-of-way agreement on your property, and there I go again, if you don't want a pipeline right-of-way easement on your property, sorry about that, you say, no, hey, no thank you, guys, I'm not interested. However, there's somewhere in between. Some people say, oh, well, I really want it. That's going to get me royalties. Be careful with that mind frame. But another strategy is to say, or another, I don't know if it's a strategy, but another way to handle it is to say, okay, hey, look, I'd like you to limit this agreement in some ways here. I don't want you to have these rights forever. We want to limit that, all the reasons why I said. But then say, I'm going to let you go ahead. You can do a survey, but please know that I'm not really inclined to ever have a pipeline right-of-way easement on my property. Got it right that time. No, I don't want an easement on my property, but I'll let you look, and who knows? Maybe I'll change my mind, but I don't see that happening. So then, company comes back in 6 months, a year, a couple months, whenever, says, hey, landowner, we've done this survey, and we'd really like to put a pipeline agreement on your property. Well, and there I go, pipeline easement on your property. So what you say then is, well, okay, give me these documents, I'll think about it. And then you call somebody like an attorney who knows what they're doing. And you say, hey, here's what's going on. I really don't want this. Well, the first thing is to understand, can you say no? And despite what the companies say, in many, many cases, you can. Not always, but you can always say no to sign. Pretty much, you don't have to sign. The company may have lease rights, but hey, sometimes you say, company, go ahead and use the lease. That's fine, but I'm just not going to sign this other agreement. And you'd be surprised. That can be a very powerful tool, but that's a very specific individual circumstance, and that's why now you're at the point where you want to call someone. So you could also, though, say, yeah, I really don't want this easement on my property. I know I'll let you do the survey, but I'm not interested. Or you can also say, listen, I don't want this easement on my property. I have no desire for this. But if you want to do it bad enough, I can come up with a number that would justify it, meaning, financial compensation number that would justify me agreeing to this or allowing it. But if you don't want to agree to this number, then you know what? Thank you, but no thank you. So you have the opportunity, and maybe it's a real long shot, but you put it out there and you say, if you want to do this, I'll have it. But other than that, I'm not interested. If you listen regularly, you know that I talk a lot about location and compensation. Location and compensation. So when a company comes back and they say, hey, landowner, we surveyed your property and we'd like to put a pipeline, you may say, well, I really don't want one. And the company says, what do you offer? And the company says, I'm offering you $20,000. And you say, I don't want one, but if you put it at this particular location and you're willing to pay me $50,000, well, then I'm willing to listen and consider and go ahead maybe and do this. Establish location compensation right away, because if you never are going to agree on location and compensation, don't do the work on the terms. Don't hire an attorney to negotiate the terms. Now, you may and very well may want to, in a lot of cases you should, maybe hire an attorney to negotiate the price or location, which doesn't take very long. That's the good thing. Very simple. Okay, client wants blank. You're willing to pay blank. If you change and agree to meet my client's demands, here's my number. Otherwise, thank you, but no thank you. But you have to look, and this is where it gets more complicated, and this isn't the show. Go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. Done other shows on this subject. Then you look and say, do I have the right to say no? If the company starts pushing me and forcing me, please, landowner, get help. So you may want to agree to survey permission to still have the ability in the future to put out, maybe it's a long shot compensation request. You put it out there and the company wants to agree to it. You've done a lot better. Things to think about. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. Check out PAGasleaseAttorney.com. Check out PipelineAttorney.com. And check me out. I'll be back next week from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. Have a great week, everyone.